what they are, but for everyone in the organization. So we have invited Wendy Winder here. She is an auditor with the Utah Office for Victims of Crime. And she's going to present on a minors certification. Not even going into the name.
It's a lot, I know. And I promise I'm going to make this quick. The information is very straightforward, and I did what everybody hates. We're going to see that my PowerPoint literally like spells out everything I need to talk to you about, because people are going to have a lot of questions about this. And this is something that everybody's going to have to address immediately. It's going to be monitored through the next grant cycle. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I'm going to talk about the condition that is related to the determination that has to be made in order for someone to be eligible to interact with minors who participate in any federal grant program. So this is not all. Thank you. Okay, so there's a lot of federal language in here. Most of this is coming straight from the federal government, and you can find all of this. There's, I have a list at the end of where you can find this information. So this award condition actually started with the fiscal year 19 federal grant, or their fiscal year 19. So in October of 2018 is when this became effective. However, all 50 states have been lagging, and this year, the like OBC, OBW, they are really pushing to make sure that this is in compliance. They're checking with every state, and states are now getting findings, but maybe not making sure their sub-recipients are complying. And so, welcome to the party. We all get to start complying now. Yeah. So the what a couple of things that you need to know is when we talk about you being a sub-recipient, having a sub-award, so you're receiving an award from the OBC or any other federal source, because this actually applies to any federal, any federal funding through the Department of Justice. So if you have sub-recipients under your award, so you contract with people to provide services, then you have to ensure that they are following this as well. That's part of the requirement. So we will check to see that you are doing this with the people that you subcontract with. And then all of this information is on the Office of Justice Programs website. And this PowerPoint and everything I talk about today is in the folder that you can access with the QR code. So you'll be able to take all of this back, which is why I wrote it this way. So the first thing you have to do is determine if this condition applies to you. And I will tell you, we'll get into a little bit why, but I will tell you that almost every agency in the state who receives funding from the OBC is going to have a this condition because of the way that the wording is set up. So there's these three things to consider, and this is not an and. It doesn't have to meet all three. It's if you hit any one of these things, then you are required to comply with this grant condition. So if even one activity under your award is intended to benefit minors, if your program is intended to benefit the general public or adults, but it's reasonable to believe that minors could take part in activities, or it's reasonable to believe that you'll be interacting with minors while carrying out your program plan. So anything in your program plan talks about benefit services to minors. If you're serving adults, but the minors are likely to interact, basically, if there's any interaction with minors in your program, then you're going to have to comply with this. So most agencies will have to. If you have questions and you're unsure, you're always welcome to reach out to us, and we can talk through it with you and see what's going on. So there are some very specific definitions that are in the federal language that are quite confusing, and it's taken us months and months to get some clarification on what these things mean. So the first thing you have to know is what a participating minor is. So, I literally just put all the words on there, but it's all individuals under the age of 18 who are participating in a program that is either funded by the federal money or you're using match to fund that program related to those federal dollars. So they also talk about interaction with minors, and so the definition that they use for interaction is it includes any physical contact, oral and written communication, and transmission of images or messages. So text messaging, phone calls, if you're running a hotline, and it's likely that a minor can call in, that would count. If you are sending out letters, let's say that you have a minor that is participating in a program and you send a letter to that person at their home. All of that is considered interaction. And then the activities under the award. So this is anything under paid for with federal funds or the matching dollars, activities that are carried out by you, the subrecipient, and anything that's carried out by people you subcontract with. So it's basically any program that is funded through the grants. Is what the activities under the award are. So a couple of examples, domestic violence shelters are a very easy example. They have programs that are primarily intended to benefit adult victims of domestic violence, but those victims often come from children. And so there are programs at the shelters that are there to help with the minors. They do safety planning, they provide services, they do groups, all of those things. So their main purpose may not have initially been to serve those minors, but they're going to serve those minors. Even if they don't have a program, but there are going to be minors in the shelter, it would be reasonable to believe that they're going to have to interact with those minors while carrying out that program. And so that would be another place that would apply. Some of the places that we really kind of went back and forth on, it's like legal agencies, attorneys' offices, things like that. But some of you may receive it, but we kind of sent out a survey talking about asking questions about how people in those agencies interact with minors. And we basically came back from almost every agency except maybe one, that there are occasions when they may interview a victim who is a minor, even with the parent there, but the parent being there does not negate the requirement that you have to have this condition met. So if you had another employee there who had passed all of the requirements for this condition, that would be fine, but the parent being there doesn't offset that requirement. So who does this apply to? This is going to be staff working in the grant. This is going to be a consultant, a contractor, an employee of a contractor. This can include volunteers, law enforcement, prosecutors, DCFS workers, therapists, all of those people. If you are paying them under your award or sending the minors in your program to them for services, you have to ensure that they have passed this condition as well. And I keep saying this condition, I can probably explain. This is related to kind of a background check and checking to see that they are safe to meet with kids. So there's some specific requirements that will go into there. The places, the people that it does not include are other minors in your program. The parents of the victims don't have to be included. And if somebody happens to stop in your office, but they don't really interact with minors in the program, they're not required to undergo this process. So an example would be, let's say you are holding a youth group and a board member is coming to the office. That board member is likely to be in the same space as those minors, but it is what they call unexpected and brief contact. So you're not expecting them to actually spend time with the minors, interacting with them and helping participate in the program, so they would not need to meet that condition. So this is what you have to do in order to certify that someone is eligible to interact with minors. There's two basic categories. The first one is you have to do sex offender and child abuse registry checks, including the national credit check. And I always butcher this name and you can see why it's like through. I don't know, it's up there. Trojan National Sex Offender Registry. Can't say it. It's the national registry where sex offenders are registered, and then you also need to check the sex offender registry for the state where your program is, the state where the person currently lives, and anywhere they have lived or gone to school in the prior 5 years. So you will have to get a little bit of information from your employees or contractors in order to get that check done. The other thing that you have to do is a fingerprint-based search for criminal history. So there's lots of ways to accomplish this, but it's the same requirement where it has to be for all of the jurisdictions where that person has been working from school in the previous 5 years. And it does have to be fingerprint-based. So I've worked with even law enforcement agencies who don't require their non-post certified staff to do fingerprint-based background checks. They just do like a name-based search. They'll just check the state of Utah to see if there's anything that pops up. And that's it, they move on with it, which is okay for their own policies, but it would not qualify under these conditions. So one thing I want to talk about a little bit is a lot of people, a lot of programs who utilize the federal grants are licensed through the Department of Health and Services, and they have a licensing division that does background checks for those programs. So those background checks are fantastic. It's an FBI search. So it covers the entire country, and that is actually the preferred method. That's what the federal government would like you to do, but it is not required. It is definitely preferred because it prevents, well, first of all, it checks nationwide, but it also prevents you from missing a state. If somebody knew they were convicted of something in the state, they just leave off that they ever worked there, and then you don't know that they had a conviction in that state. So if you can access the FBI search, that's fantastic. If not, do local jurisdictions search. I'll be honest, I don't know how that works. So, hopefully you can work through your licensing program. There are a few reasons why doing background check through something like licensing isn't sufficient to meet the condition. It's the first step, getting that fingerprint-based search done. But once it comes back, get the results back, there are a few things that you have to check that are generally more stringent than any programs I've seen. I've never even seen a law enforcement agency who meets these requirements in their background checks. So these are the 4 conditions under which somebody is automatically disqualified from being able to interact with minors. So if they withhold consent, if they give you false information in order to avoid something being found out, if they're listed as a registered sex offender, really anywhere in the country, but want to make sure you're remembering to check the federal site. Or if they've been convicted of any crime that we've got listed here, and I'll mention those in a second, or anything that's like their, so different jurisdictions use different words for crimes. It can be the same thing, but if it's anything related to these that would basically be its equivalent, then it would disqualify it. So you've got sexual or physical abuse, neglect, or endangerment of an individual under 18. Rape or sexual assault, including conspiracy, with that, then you've got exploitation, kidnapping, voyeurism, or if that person has been determined by any federal, state, or tribal agency to be not suitable to interact with minors. So if somebody leaves one program, having been determined by that government program to not be eligible to interact with minors, and they come to your program, they are automatically disqualified. Doesn't matter what the reasons were. If they went through these checks and were disqualified by those other agencies, then you can't qualify them after that. So just make sure that when you get those background checks back, you're checking them for these specific types of crimes. And we'll go into options if they don't pass in the minute, but this is very like bland and basic, and I get that it's very. But these are the key things that you need to know, and hopefully you can take back to your agencies to make sure that this all gets done. So determinations must be made before an individual can interact with minors in your program. That's to be done before. They have to, the fingerprint-based search and the sex offender registry searches have to be done within 6 months of their eligibility. So there's some documentation we'll go about. We'll talk about in just a minute. You can't have done those searches more than 6 months before you make this determination. So if your program is not already in compliance with this, then you need to now start. Let's say an employee had a background check done when they started 9 months ago. You would have to rerun their background, their fingerprint-based background check in order to qualify them to interact with them. So it can't be more than 6 months.
With the online question, I think it's probably pretty close. It's state licensing fingerprint, just to clarify, that background requirement to remain licensed to be redone.
Okay, so we are going to talk about that. That's a fantastic question. So, in fact, let's just skip to that really quick because it's on this slide here. A professional licensure through any state does not offset this requirement. it has to, those requirements have to have been met within 6 months of them starting to interact with minors in your program. So if they are an attorney, a licensed therapist, law enforcement, DCFS workers, who else is it? No, there's a lot of. I know I'm missing somebody that's, nurses, same nurses. That's another really big one that people assume that the same nurses would automatically be found eligible, but the licensure made no difference. This is a requirement that you have to meet. Checks have to be done no more than 6 months prior to you making your own determination. And I think that's been a big point of concern and contention. There's a lot of people who think that by those licenses, they should be automatically qualified, and that's just not the way it is been set up. So go back a little bit. I hope that answered the question. If not on there, shut up. So because of this requirement that searches are done within 6 months, if you have an employee who's been working in your program for 5 years and they want to switch into your program that is funded in part by the grants, you would have to do this determination before they come to the program, and it has to rely on those searches that are done more than 6 months before. So again, if it's a current employee, 9 months ago, they had their background check run, you can use RAT back, they automatically do it every year. You have to make sure that this certification that you fill out is done more than 6 months before they transfer into your program. Now, you do have the option to just have all of your programmatic staff automatically switch into that program. You could do these searches in advance for them so that they're already certified. These only have to be redone every 5 years. Or if you get information that makes you believe that something may have occurred that would disqualify them. So you find out that they've maybe been arrested in the meantime, you would have to do searches. But hopefully that's something you would address anyway. But just keep that in mind. If you only have a few people in your program and they're also in and out, and they might be going in, then you might want to just go ahead and do this in advance. This last line is kind of scary. We don't really know how to address this. There is no way for us to address this and the federal requirements, but there is no grace period. So with this being in effect since 2019, if you go to the office tomorrow and you haven't had the determination, under this rule, you cannot participate in the program that you're appointed. Now, we're not going to shut down all the agencies in the state because this commission has not been met yet. We understand that even though this has been out for a while, honestly, most agencies are just unaware. Not sure why. I know that we talked about it, and I sent out some information during this last Friday here, but I also sent out a whole lot of information, and so it can be a little difficult to stick with everything. But we're just asking that you get this done as quickly as possible. We already know that we're out of compliance. We just recently had a federal audit come in on our office. We're aware that not all of the agencies are in compliance with this yet. Hopefully you are, but if you're not, get on this right away. It's during this upcoming grant cycle when we cannot do site visits and we do desk reviews. We will be checking that all of these are done. And if by that time they're not done, those employees will not be able to continue working in that part of the program until the checks are done. However, it doesn't mean that they have to be fired because they have to be kicked out of the program. It just means that you have to take steps to ensure that they don't interact with minors until that check is done. So they can work in a different part of the program that is going to be less likely to get that. I know I got ahead of myself a little bit there, but again, I just want to hit on a couple of things, and you can read this, you can see this, but your work condition applies to all of the professionals. I know I've said that a couple of times, but I think that's been a little hard for people to see it. Part of your plan is funding to send minors to therapy with a licensed therapist. That therapist has to undergo this check, and you have to have documentation for it in hand before you can send minors to them. So just keep all of that in mind when you're trying to set this program for this compliance on this condition up. So yes, go ahead.
They make me use them.
I don't want to get too close to that out.
No, you're getting. So if your agency has like already a policy that they do criminal background check on all employees and volunteers, like when they start getting, they'll have to have another one that they've done within the last 6 months to meet these compliance, or if they've done one when hired or when started, that meets the requirement.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's a piece that's the reason why I'm really hoping the agencies have seen this, we're aware of this condition and have already been working on it. Because the answer is no, in order for them to fill out the certification form that we're going to talk about in a minute, to mark a yes or no on that form saying, yes, they qualify to correct the minors, or they do not. It has to have been done within 6 months. So you have a program that's got 15 people in it.
But they don't have to do a background check every 6.
No, the background check and the sex offender searches, those have to be done every 5 years.
Right. So after this certification,
Yep, so you gotta get it all done this first time. When new employees come on, make that a priority, get that done. In the meantime, while you're waiting on background checks to come back, because I know licensing can get backed up by months. So in the meantime, just make sure that interaction with minors for that new employee or that new volunteer is done in the presence of someone else who has all of these requirements. So they can be in the room, they can be there, they just have to be within eye and earshot of someone who has been determined to be able to interact with minors. Does that answer the question? Okay. So the documentation requirements, this is what we're going to be checking when we come on site. There are very specific things that that it says you must document these things. And where this information came from was from the vote assembly. They've been doing some work with the Department of Justice. And they gave us this guidance on what needs to be in that documentation. So person's name that you're checking, person who did the check, the date that things were done, the results of that, which is going to be, do they meet all of these conditions of the background check, saying they haven't had any of these convictions or conditions that disqualify them. So you don't have to put on their form what was on their background check. We're not going to come to your agency and ask to review all of those background checks. You're just going to put the dates that it was done, the dates that it was completed, and whether or not, based on all of the criteria that we talked about, they are determined eligible to meet with the range to interact with peers. So you need to have someone in your agency who understands the rules, who understands the program, and who has basically adequate knowledge and access to the information to make that check. You can determine whoever that is. It doesn't matter if it's somebody in your HR department, program director, whoever you determine to be the best person to do this within your agency, just make sure that they have this information and they understand what their requirements are. And then the last thing, really one of the last things I want to talk about is we understand that this sounds new to a lot of people, even though the condition is not new. A lot of people are hearing about it for the first time in the last few months. So we created some sample documents that would meet all of these requirements. We will send them out. They're actually, I think, in the folder that county has. They were put in later in the day. I apologize, I didn't send them to her in advance, but they're in there now. And it's just a form where you fill in all of that information that we just talked about there. And then you're going to file that in a folder where you keep all your certifications. So that when we come on site, that's what we're going to review with them. If you want to create your own document that has all of those same requirements on it, feel free. You're just trying to ease the process just a little bit. There's actually 2 forms in there. One of them is the staff certification and the other is the agency certification. If you receive a new grant that starts July 1st, whether it's local or SAS, then that first week of July, when these new grants start, I'm going to be sending out a copy of this agency certification and asking for it to be sent back. All that is one form for the entire agency saying, based on the requirements, our agency, it does have to comply with this condition, or our agency does not have to comply with this condition. And then you're just going to send it back to us. Sign it, send it back. If you say that you do not qualify to have to meet this condition, then we'll probably give you some follow-up and need to get an understanding of why, so we can document that. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding about who really does have to follow this condition and this. So if you don't, that's okay. We'll probably just be able to follow up to check with you and talk it through. And then I mean, that's it. Those documents are there. This is just a little bit about what to expect. So we're going to come out on site. I talked about this a little bit earlier. We're just gonna check that documentation, so please have it prepared. Being in compliance with this rule means, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I want to reiterate, if those requirements are not met, for one or all of your employees, when it comes to the fall, we can out check is if you haven't even started the process, those employees are not going to be able to continue their program. You're going to have to make adjustments to your program to get that done. Up to this point, we understand that it hasn't been well known, it hasn't been talked about a whole lot, and so we understand it will take some time. But this is why we're making sure everybody is known to get this started. So just desk review time, you'll have all of this stuff going. These are just some resources. These are all links that if you download the PowerPoint, you'll be able to link into these. This is where I got the information. So it's WW, it's a link to the National Sex Offender website, and then just some documents that were created by the government of DOJ about this condition and what its requirements are. That's it. I know that was a lot of information. I know I talked really fast, but I also know that this was really a lot. And nobody was going to digest all of this today. So that's why everything's going to be in writing. You can take it back. You don't have any questions. I am well aware that nobody remembers everything we just went through. And that's why you got the boring slide that people just read off of instead of getting a good presentation. So that's my spiel. Questions? Does anybody else have questions? See, that's how thorough I was. There's just nothing left to cover. That was my goal. Also, I wanted you to get out of here early because we made the mistake of putting all the bad news at the end of the day instead of at the beginning, and then you can hear all of Alex's happy information about the balance. But we made it quick and as painless as possible. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to go over any of this with you. If there's somebody at your agency when you go back and you're like, hey, this is the person that's going to have to be in charge of this, they're more than welcome to reach out to me. We'll provide any help and technical assistance that we can. We'll help with creating policies. We're already not done policy. Hope people understood that from this last grant cycle. You do need to have a policy that says you're going to be following these recommendations, and we can help with that as well. We can help with some policies or whatever. Thank you for not falling asleep.
Thank you, Wendy.